How many times have you felt trapped in the prison of your own desires, chasing validation, success, love, only to realize that the more you got, the more hollow things felt? Perhaps you've climbed that mountain of ambition, only to peer over the edge and discover it wasn't the summit you sought at all. What if there is another way, one that doesn't deny ambition or love but transforms them? What if transcending the ego isn't about loss, but about gaining what truly matters? Welcome to the Unfolding Journey YouTube channel. I'm your name, and here we explore the inner landscape, psychology, spirituality, philosophy, to help you grow beyond who you think you are into who you truly can be. If you've ever felt restlessness in the soul, curiosity about what lies beyond the self you know, then you are in the right place. Carl Gustav Jung, Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, made a vital distinction between ego and self. The ego, in Jung's work, is the center of consciousness, our sense of identity, shaped by memories, beliefs, desires, fears. It's the I that wakes up each morning, plans, projects, worries, boasts, doubts. It is necessary for everyday life. It gives us structure, agency, individuality. But the ego is not the entirety of the psyche. Beyond it lies the self, with a capital S, the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. The self is the organizing principle, the wholeness toward which the psyche strives. Jung wrote that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is the journey toward integrating the various parts of the self, especially those parts repressed, rejected, or unknown. The ego must not dominate, but must align with and serve the self. Ego-based desires and illusions. Ego is driven by desires, for power, recognition, safety, belonging, pleasure. These are not inherently bad. But when the ego is unexamined, these desires serve illusions. The ego wants validation, so we shape our lives around applause or status. The ego fears rejection, so we hide, conform. The ego wants comfort, so we resist change, avoid discomfort. These desires create a loop. I do this, I get that, I feel good. Then I lose it, I fear losing, I feel bad. It's unstable because the external world is always in flux. The ego anchors itself in things that cannot ultimately satisfy. The limitations of the ego. Because the ego is limited by what we know, what we believe, and what we have experienced, it often repeats patterns: addiction, attachment, avoidance, comparison. The ego clings to identity labels. I am successful. I am good. I am loved. I am this religion. I am that culture. All of which are valuable only up to a point. When they become rigid, they trap rather than free. Also, the ego resists the unconscious. Jung emphasized shadow work. The parts of ourselves we do not want to acknowledge, fears, flaws, repressed impulses. Without facing these, we remain fragmented. The ego may refuse to sacrifice its illusions, but the self demands integration. The call to sacrifice. Sacrifice here doesn't mean annihilation of the ego into nothingness. It means letting go of its dominance, its illusions, its grip. It means bringing the ego under the wisdom of the self. The ego must surrender control over everything, must relinquish the idea that it is everything. It must give the reins over to deeper forces. Intuition, the unconscious, archetypes, images, symbols, dreams that guide us toward moral, spiritual, and psychological wholeness. Awareness and self-observation. The journey begins with awareness. Observe your thoughts, desires, fears without judgment. Notice when your ego talks. I need to be admired. I must avoid failure. I deserve better. Recognize these are ego voices, not necessarily truth. Meditation, mindfulness, journaling, contemplation all help cultivate this awareness. In dream analysis, Jung's great tool, the unconscious speaks in symbols. Attending to dreams reveals hidden parts of the psyche. Shadow work. One cannot become whole by ignoring the darkness. The shadow is the disowned self, our fears, weaknesses, impulses we deem unacceptable. We project shadow onto others, seeing in them what we refuse in ourselves. By bringing the shadow into consciousness, naming it, understanding its function, we reduce its power. It no longer sabotages us from behind walls. Instead, it becomes energy that can be transformed, integrated. Letting go of attachments. Ego is attached to outcomes, identities, beliefs. Spiritual transformation requires loosening attachments, not necessarily renouncing worldly life, but being unattached to the need that life must be a certain way. This could mean letting go of social expectations, letting go of fears around failure or rejection, letting go of rigid belief systems that shut off new insights, becoming aligned with the self. As the ego steps back, the self begins to lead. This means living from deeper values, inner authority rather than external approval. It means letting the wisdom of the subconscious, the intuition, archetypes guide choices. Sometimes this shows up in synchronicities, dreams, inner imagery, creative impulses. Also, the self demands authenticity. It doesn't want to wear masks or perform roles merely for social or egoic gain. It wants us to be who we truly are, even if that path is lonely, uncertain, or without applause. Transformation doesn't forego life, it enhances it. Contrary to some misconceptions, transcending the ego doesn't leave you empty or passive. On the contrary, it opens up life. You experience more meaning, more connection, more creativity. Life becomes less about avoiding pain or getting what you want, and more about participating in something larger. Service, growth, love, compassion. You become more present. You enjoy moments without needing them to fulfill you. You are less driven by fear or comparison, more guided by purpose, by authenticity. You become more resilient because the self doesn't crumble in the face of loss or change. Resistance from the ego. The ego does not give up easily. It may fight back in the form of rationalization, jealousy, despair, numbness, even spiritual bypass, using spiritual ideas to avoid dealing with psychological issues. Confusion between ego weakening and ego death. Some spiritual traditions speak of ego death, which can be misinterpreted. It's not that ego disappears completely, but that it no longer dominates. A healthy ego is necessary to function in the world. False self versus real self. There's a danger that you instead build a facade of spirituality, spiritual ego, pride in having transcended. The real self is humble, integrated, grounded. Attachment to the self as idea. Even the self can become an idol. You could idealize what it means to be spiritual enough, or what wholeness should look like. That too is a trap, another layer of ego. True transformation is dynamic, living imperfect. Dream symbolism. Suppose someone dreams of being chased by a shadowy figure. The ego might fear it, suppress it. But exploring what this figure represents, some repressed fear, guilt, or trait, gradually brings insight. Integrating that figure reduces fear, expands psychological freedom. Life crisis as a door. Often spiritual transformation occurs through crisis, loss, illness, failure. The ego wants to avoid suffering. The self uses suffering as a teacher. In crisis, one may be forced to let go of illusions. The illusion of control, the illusion of permanence, the illusion of identity. Once the ego's defenses fall away, transformation becomes possible. Creative expression. Art, dance, music, or writing can help the self speak. Ego might say, "Is this good enough?" The self says, "This is true." The artist who transcends concern for judgment can tap into something greater. The muse, the archetypes, the unconscious. When ego is transcended and aligned with self, several things often occur. Inner peace. There is less inner conflict, less anxiety rooted in wanting, avoiding, comparing. One becomes more at peace with the flow of life. Authentic relationships. Less projection, less expectation. One can relate from genuine presence rather than from what one wants others to think. Greater compassion. Understanding one's own shadow leads to empathy for others. One sees the human complexity in oneself and others. Sense of purpose and meaning. Rather than chasing external success, one discovers inner purpose, the calling or path aligned with one's deeper self. Resilience and freedom. When one is less tied to egoic approval, to external identity, one becomes freer. Losses, changes, endings, they hurt, but they no longer shatter the core. There is a center that holds. Sacrificing the ego isn't about annihilating who you are. It's about letting go of who you think you are, so you can become who you truly are. Jung's self is not an abstract idea. It is the living current beneath and beyond the ego's masks. The journey of spiritual transformation is ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary in that it demands courage, honesty, patience. Extraordinary in that it opens you to a dimension of meaning, purpose, wholeness you may have glimpsed but never yet inhabited fully. If you felt stirred by this exploration, consider these steps. Cultivate awareness, confront your shadow, loosen attachments, follow your inner guidance. Begin today with one honest question. What part of my ego do I cling to that no longer serves me? And be willing to let it go. Thank you for being here on the unfolding journey. If this video has awakened something in you, or helped you see a new aspect of your inner world, please like, share, and comment below. What ego-based desire are you willing to let go of? And most importantly, if you want to continue exploring these paths together, deep dives into Jung, practices for integration, stories of transformation, then subscribe and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the unfolding. Until next time, journey well, journey deeply.